Hey, this is Scott from MasterExcelTraining.com. Today I'm going to talk about data validation. So what is data validation? It allows us to define the format of the input into a cell in Microsoft Excel. So what it's basically doing is allowing us to exclude erroneous information from being entered into our spreadsheet. Now it might sound a little complicated, but I think if I show it to you, it'll make a lot of sense. It's pretty easy once you actually see how to do it. So what I've done here is I've just made a quick little new customer form. Now someone's going to enter this data in, whether it's the actual customer or whether it's somebody in the company, it doesn't really matter. But somebody actually has to key in these fields. So here we have, say, a last name. So I'm just going to start keying in these fields. So we'll say last name Jones, then we'll say, maybe Scott. Street address, we'll say 142nd Street. Oops. We'll say Pittsburgh. And now, if you live in the United States or watch sports, you probably know that Pittsburgh is in Pennsylvania. But here's the rub. How do we enter in the word Pennsylvania? I don't know. Everybody's probably going to do it a little differently. So somebody might go PA, Pennsylvania. Someone might do PA dot, Pennsylvania. Someone might just say Penn. Someone might say Penn dot. Someone might actually write out, Pennsylvania correctly. Or somebody might type out Pennsylvania. So we don't really know. And if you're going to roll this up into a report by, say, a state, we might have 6 different Pennsylvanias, you could see, or more, depending on how people type this in. So I want to control how the state comes in. And using data validation allows me to do that. So let me just show you how I'll do that, because it'll make it a little bit easier to see. So I go up into the ribbon, and I go to the Data tab. Under the Data Tools, I see data validation. So the first thing before I even click data validation, I want to make sure that my mouse is in the cell that I want to have the data validated. So it's in the state input, which is D14, and that's where I am, D14. So I'm going to go back into D14, and now I'm going to click data validation. Now it brings up this dialog box, which allows me to do a few things. Right now it's allowing any value into cell D14. But I want to be able to pick, I want the person who's entering data into this form to be able to pick the state. The state, there's 50 states in the United States. So that's a manageable list for someone to go through and pick one. I mean, if you had a list of, say, every city in the United States, there's probably tens of thousands of cities. So that's kind of unreasonable. So you have to allow just the typing in of text in that field. But the state, we could kind of narrow it down to 50 of them. So let's just put together a list. So in the validation criteria, I'm going to allow not any value. I'm going to go down to list. So basically, I'm going to restrict that field to only be one of the values in the list that I'm going to define. So where's the list? Well, right now you see there's a source, and that's asking me for the source of the list, and it is blank. So I'm going to put my mouse in here. I might even minimize this. Now here's the way I do it, and you don't have to do it this way. When I'm making lists that I want to have as validation, I typically do it on a separate sheet. And then at the end of the day, I'll hide that sheet so that people don't necessarily, unless they're really looking for it, they're not going to find it. Because you don't want people changing your list, because that'll change the values that they could select. So here I have a list of 50 states. Now I have a heading for state, but I don't want to start with that, because then the word state will be in my state list, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to start with the first state. I'm going to hold Shift-N down, and I'm going to select all of those fields. So now I can maximize this, come back to sheet 1, and now I see, I don't know why it added this little plus sign, but let's get rid of that. I'm allowing a list in this field, and this is the list, the source. So if I say OK, you could see now that I have this little drop down arrow. If I click it, it'll show me everything in that list. So if I go to Pennsylvania, and now I could guarantee that if someone selects Pennsylvania, this is the format. It could be the full word. It doesn't matter what the format was in that list. But if they're going to pick Pennsylvania, they're going to pick it exactly the way I want them to pick it. Let's do one more data validation. Let's do one for the zip code. So right now I could type in the word, say, Scott for a zip code. Not a big deal. But I don't want that. I want there to be a 5-digit number for the zip code. So again, I'm going to put the mouse right into that field. And this time it's going to be D15. I'm going to go back up into Data, Data Tools, Data Validation. Now, instead of list, because I don't want someone to scroll through 100,000 zip codes, I just want to make sure that they're going to enter in a whole number. And now it's basically going to give me the between values. I have to kind of define that. So we know a zip code can't be less than 1, so we'll make it, the minimum is 1, and the maximum has got to be 99999. And that's it. So they can't enter in anything other than that. So if I type in, 90210, great. 90210, it's a valid zip code, or at least in my criteria. But if I type in, say, 100,000, now I'm getting this error message. It literally stopped. This little red X means it's stopping the transaction. It won't allow any data to be put into that field. The value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. So let me show you a little bit about those error messages, because there's a couple things we could do with them. And they're really kind of handy. You see here that, I'll just show you real quick, this is a number. So this is going to be right justified. This is a text field, so it's left justified. So if I want this number to come over and be left justified, I could force it to be left justified, in case you were wondering. But let's just go back into the data validation. So I'm going to put it back on the zip code input field. I'm going to go back to data. I'm going to go back to data validation. Now, let's just say I want to have a message, an input message. When I put my mouse into this particular field, I could just say something like the title could be zip, and I could just say, please enter a 5-digit zip code. If I say okay, now, see, if I'm not in that field, nothing. But when I put my mouse in the field, it's actually giving me, please enter a 5-digit zip code. I can go one step further, though, if I go back into data validation, and now I could say what happens if they don't put the correct format into that cell. So like this red X I've mentioned is stop. What that actually does is it does not allow anything to go into that field until we get into the correct format. So again, if you want, you could do a title, if that's up to you. Title, enter 5-digit zip. So now if I come back in here and I type in 100,000, it stops it and it says enter 5-digit zip. Retry, and then I go to 99999, no problem. Let's just say, it's for whatever reason you don't necessarily need to stop that. You could just give a warning. So there could be times where you don't necessarily want to stop them from entering data, but you want to warn them that maybe something is not in the correct format. So here we go. I could just say not a 5-digit zip. And what this will allow you to do is actually here. So if I put in 90210, no problem. 90210, now it's warning me. Not a 5-digit zip. Do I want to continue? I could say, see, this is a warning, so I could say yes and leave it like that. But, if you really want people to adhere to a certain format, I probably would put the stop in. But, that's just if you want someone to have a warning, you could do that. One of the last things here is you could actually just give some informational thing. So, you could just be like, hey, thanks for your input. And we could get rid of the title. Let's just say, I want that in there right now. So now if you type in basically anything, because this is just for informational purposes, I could put that much in and it'll still say Thanks for your input. So it doesn't prevent anything. So if you really wanted someone to adhere to a certain format, I would definitely use the stop. If you wanted to warn somebody, but you would still allow some other format in, you could use the warning. So if you just want to give someone a message, you could use the informational one. So I think that should kind of cover most of data validation for the most part. I mean, there's a few different things in the settings. So you could do whole numbers, decimals, time, date. Let's just say you wanted to limit the text length of a name. So here I could just do data validation and come to text length. And I could say minimum it's got to be, 1, maximum is 25. Just so someone can't type in like a bunch of gibberish into this cell. So if they just start going, like crazy amount of things here, it'll immediately stop that. So that's one of the other ways you could do it. I mean, you're probably not going to have a list of every name, so that wouldn't work in that case. But you could stop, prevent a lot of garbage being put into cells. So it's just something to think about. It definitely comes in handy. It's definitely useful. Hopefully, as you're designing things in Excel, you could see ways to use this. I like to use the list on a separate tab, and then I would just like right click and hide that tab, just so that, unless someone's really looking for it, they don't know where the list is. Some people put the list all the way over to the right, so they hit end over and they'll put the list way over here somewhere, which is fine. But if it's on a live spreadsheet, someone could tamper with it, someone could delete it accidentally, because if someone says, oh, let me delete these 4 rows here, and your information is within those 4 rows, you'll lose information. So that's why I always go for the separate tab. But, whatever works for you. All right, so hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you later. Alrighty, thanks. I hope you enjoyed this Excel tip. If you did like this video, please hit like, and please subscribe to my channel so you never miss any of my Excel tips and tricks. And please check out my complete Excel training course on udemy.com. I'm offering all of my YouTube viewers an 80% discount on the complete course. Just click the link below or use the promo code YouTube80. This course is currently 8 hours long and is broken down into 3 sections. You have the basics and beyond, then you have section 2, ultimate reconciliation and analysis, and lastly, pivot table domination. So check it out, click the link, and save 80%. Till next time, this is Scott, signing off.